Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there, welcome back to Reimagining Love. You likely know today's guest by his pen name, Young Pueblo. He has an online audience of over 4 million people, and he's a New York Times bestselling author whose books have been translated into over 25 languages. Diego Perez is the mind behind all this magic, and I am so glad to have him on the show. His work focuses on the power of self-healing, creating healthy relationships, and cultivating self-awareness. And his meditation practice is central to all that he shares with the world. We get into all of that in this conversation as we dig into the lessons and reflections that he's woven together in his new book, How to Love Better: The Path to Deeper Connection Through Growth, Kindness, and Compassion, which is out in the world today. Our conversation went in so many beautiful directions, and Diego is such a thoughtful soul. We dove into what it means to argue and disagree peacefully with a partner, the power of meditation, and why it's important that we work with the universe, not against it. I think my favorite part of our chat was when Diego opened up about his own love story with his wife, Sarah. And at the end, we explore a wonderful question from a listener in Chicago who is feeling doubts in her relationship and isn't sure about the way forward. I think you're going to love hearing from him. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Diego. Diego, thank you for taking the time to be with me today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be talking, Alexandra. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we crossed paths the first time when we were part of Maria Shriver's conference maybe a year or two, a couple of years ago, probably. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I really liked it. So I was thrilled that I was getting the opportunity to talk again. Hope Maria gets to hear this one. I think she'll be really happy to hear that we're having this convo together.
That's right. Hi, Maria. So on Reimagining Love, I like to start with a question, a relational self-awareness question that I ask all of our guests. Are you ready?
Yes, very.
Good. Diego, I would love to hear how you are reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days.
That's a great question. I think the most important relationship I have is the one with my wife. And the way we are reimagining love these days is trying to not have everything be about excitement and just have a little more focus on the small moments. We've found that over this past fall, we've been going on these really long walks. There are these rail trails in Massachusetts where they literally have old train lines that are no longer in use, and they'll pull out the train tracks, and then it's just this long path that people can walk on or ride bikes on, and it'll last for miles. And we found that those quiet moments when we were just walking together were like some of the best moments we've had as a couple in the last year. It's been feeling really important to just put ever more value in the tiny little quiet moments now that we've been together for, I think, almost 17 years.
I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like a softer love as almost an antidote to how intense the world feels right now. And as you were saying that, I was thinking certainly part of the small quiet is that the treasure of a long-term relationship. But I wonder if there's something about that need for the small and the quiet as like an antidote to how frightening and big and chaotic the big picture of the world can feel.
That sounds like a great book title. soft love.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. Just put me in the acknowledgments in the back because that's when you said that, I was like, that's brilliant. Because I think we get way too focused on the heightened moments, like the moments of ecstasy and bliss and joy, and I think love, especially if it's a long term relationship, it has so many ups and downs that you got to work with them. There's beauty in the down moments too.
Yeah. And so that's what you and Sarah are really working with this year is savoring. I think sometimes we are at risk of, like denigrating the simple and the quiet. And so you and Sarah are really reimagining that this is part of the way we care for this marriage of ours.
Totally. And even in the down moments, we've been finding like whenever we do have arguments, in the down moments where we know there's tension between us, but that tension is being held by a layer of peace where we're like not seeing each other as an enemy, and we can feel the tension between us, but it's like just so much more calmly held than before. And even that feels like a sweet victory because it's like, yeah, we're working something out. Sure, someone needs to apologize, but we're okay. Like we can still see each other a little better than before.
One of my really important mentors in graduate school said that she felt this big shift in her marriage when she went from feeling like, I hate this person when she was fighting with her husband to being able to say, I hate this moment when she was fighting with her partner. It's a really different conceptualization. And that's what I'm hearing you say. Not that you ever hated Sarah, but just that there's a feeling of like, this is uncomfortable, but there's a layer of peace under it, that it's not turning against each other. We're struggling, we're maybe not in understanding, but we're not against each other in the same way that you had known in the past.
Yeah, it's a bit of a battle too because we're almost working against the like survivalist tendencies. Like I used to notice that a lot in my mind where we would fall into an argument and all of a sudden it would feel like life or death. But it's like I'm not under threat. Like I'm not like we're okay. We're literally just having a serious argument, but we're gonna be fine. And it took gradual training of the mind to sort of remind myself, okay, this is like I'm talking to my favorite person. This is my roommate. This is the person that I love to be around. So even though we may disagree, or even though if she has said something hurtful to me or whatever it could be, like you're still in a relatively safe environment.
Okay, I want to come back to that because I've got some more questions about your and Sarah's story. But I want to zoom out for a moment because we're part of why we're having this conversation right now is that you have a new book and that you've birthed another book in the world called How to Love Better. And I remember years ago when I downloaded Instagram, following your account was one of the very first things that I did. Like that was how I discovered you initially, like way back when. And I was just wanting to ask you what it's been like for you over these years to receive the love and the adoration of this community that you have built and nurtured and written to and written for these years. What's that been like for you to receive?
Well, it's been incredibly life-changing. I mean, it's changed my life so much. I'm really grateful to the people that I've been able to connect, as a like connecting like as a collective, like as a group, and also with the individuals that I've met along the way because I've met a bunch of like, really good friends, people who I love to support, people who support me, like and it's also just like I grew up really really poor, so being able to, share things on Instagram, share reflections that can hopefully help people develop self awareness, and then be able to bring people a product and give them a book that they buy and then they then share with friends. It's been radically life changing. So, on so many levels, I'm incredibly grateful. And at the same time, I'm also really careful with the fact that I'm just one person. Like I'm just one person and I don't think that like, what I'm saying is like perfect or anything like that. These are just reflections that I'm putting out there and whether you agree with them or not, I'm hoping they can help you build some degree of self-awareness. I think it's just been a beautiful long journey and it's been fun just like seeing how we all think together on Instagram.
I noticed that at the end of the book, you wrote towards the end of the book, quote, "We live in a special time in human history when millions around the world are actively healing themselves of past trauma, old hurt, and the tension that makes the mind heavy." End quote. So you really are so aware that you are part of something that is big and collective and revolutionary. Where does this collective healing that you are a part of and I am a part of, what's possible here, do you think?
I think a lot of it is coming from the fact that I think we're all just like collectively tired of being miserable. Like we're just tired of,
Heavy.
yeah, we're the heaviness, it's like how can I get rid of it but in a way that's actually sustainable, right? Not just by eating something or watching TV, but like how can I actually deal with the heavy emotions that have been imprinted on my mind? And I think it's just a beautiful moment that we live in where millions of people doing all these different forms of therapy, millions of people meditating in all these different traditions. I think it really comes from us just being exhausted by the own tension that we feel in our mind and also seeing that something can be different because I grew up in a way where if you had some sort of mental ailment or physical ailment, you were just going to have to deal with it for the rest of your life. But it feels like within the last sort of 20, 25 years or so, people are very en masse saying, no, there has to be a way for me to overcome, for me to be able to heal myself very deeply. And I definitely know that firsthand from my own experiences with, overcoming, drug and alcohol abuse, overcoming sadness and anxiety, and finding my own way through meditating. But it's just been honestly really inspiring. And I love being able to see that on Instagram, we have these conversations with each other. And I remember in 2016 and 2017, where everyone's talking about self love and everyone's trying to figure out, like, oh, is self love really real? Is it valuable? How can I use it? And then the conversation will change. And, from 2017 to 2019, everyone's talking about letting go. Like, how do you actually let go? Like, how do you, enact this in your life so that you don't have to feel as much tension in your mind? And then the conversation in like 2019 to like 2021 changes and everyone's talking about boundaries, and it's like, and that will then change over. And lately, the focus has been because we've done so much work on ourselves as individuals, we're seeing how that work impacts our relationships. And that's why you have a lot of people talking about how do you build harmony in a relationship and also how do relationships affect your nervous system and these things. So it's interesting watching these collective conversations happen and being a part of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the heart of my work is how do we take, the self-awareness and really make it relational. I know that is right where you are with this book that you're working on now, that the self-love, as you're saying, the self-love is in the service. It's not just sort of like the end of the sentence there. It's like, okay, really working on my relationship with myself. It is I do that work so that I can create something different and richer in the space between myself and the people I love so much.
Yeah. And I think to me, honestly, like when I went into meditating I did my first course, Silent Tended Retreat in 2012. I went into it because I needed to save myself. Like my mind just felt absurdly heavy from, growing up with poverty, like running away from my emotions. And I knew that I had to just sort of like reframe my mind, like do something about it. And what was really funny to me that was absolutely unexpected was that when I started meditating and cultivating my mind, I ended up developing a lot more peace, a lot more compassion, a lot more understanding, a lot more patience for myself. But then that same exact emotional skill set, immediately I found that I could then use it to bring more harmony into my relationship with my wife. And that was totally unexpected because I'm into meditating to like help myself. And then I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, wow, like actually the same things that are helping me, I can bring into the tough moments in my relationship.
Do you remember back in 2012 why? So, in order to save yourself, you went to your first meditation retreat. Do you know why you did that instead of therapy? I'm just interested, like, why was that? Why do you think meditation was your entry point?
I think it's for the same reason that a lot of people go to whatever it is that they do. Like I just had someone who was very close to me. One of my best friends, Sam, he went to a meditation retreat and he told me all about it. And I think if Sam had probably told me, I just talked to a fantastic therapist, he was amazing, you should go talk to him, I probably would have done that. But just because he had gone to a retreat, I was like, let me check it out because I have confidence in him. I have, I trust the way he perceives things. So I think that's why I ended up over there.
I think it's so beautiful because you say this throughout the book, that there are a number of healing modalities and there's no right way to sequence it. But that was your way in, that was your portal. But it could have been, to your point, it could have been therapy. If Sam had been in therapy, that might have been your first.
Yeah. And I'm intentionally repetitive about that point because I don't want to put any thing on a pedestal as this thing is above all others, because I think it's much more important to understand that every mind has its own shape of conditioning. And what really helps my mind may not necessarily help your mind. And I've found that repeatedly where, I have friends who they would never go to meditate for a long retreat, but they have had therapists that have profoundly helped them change their actions. And if something is helping you change your actions and make better decisions and become closer to yourself and to others, then it's good. It's helping you.
Another through line in the book are these 3 green flags, the greenest of flags, I think you call them at one point. uh, and their growth, kindness, and compassion. Though that is what you really invite your reader to be: A, seeking those qualities in a partner, and B, cultivating those qualities within ourselves. So can we talk them through each of them one at a time? Can you start
Yeah,
with kindness?
absolutely.
How does kindness, like boots on the ground, what does kindness look and feel like? And how do we cultivate it in ourselves? How do we know when we found it in another?
It usually looks like I remember when I was writing my first book and my wife was working as a scientist, we would spend all day apart. We'd probably text each other a few times during the day, but I had no full conception of how her day went. So when she would come home, I started learning. I'm like, well, even if I've had a challenging day, I want to own the fact that I did have a challenging day, but I still want to treat her with kindness, with gentleness, because I don't really know how her day went. She could have had the worst day ever. And that's something that we both learned over time, that when you are in proximity to another human being, and that could be your roommate, your parents, like whoever you're closest to, that person is usually going to see the best of you and the worst of you. So
Whether you like it or not.
whether you like it or not, because that's just how we are,
Mhm.
we're going to show all of ourselves to whoever we're closest to. And I think what that really meant to me was like, we have to approach our partners with kindness because they are going to see the worst of us. They're going to see us when we're down and out. But we have to make sure that we don't get into the loop where they're only seeing the worst of us. And that doesn't mean hiding anything. It just means also when you feel good, be intentional about bringing gentleness to the environment. The other element of that that's really critical is compassion. And I speak about a very specific type of compassion where it's you literally being able to pull yourself out of your perspective to see the perspective of another. When you look at how to argue, and there's so many different methods with how to handle a difficult moment, at the root of all of them is the ability to pull yourself out of your perspective and see the perspective of another, and vice versa, because then you can have the type of understanding, be able to really see each other so that you can resolve and come to some sort of solution.
And traveling out of your experience into your partner's experience is not self-abandonment.
Oh,
That
not at
is
all.
not
Yeah.
self-abandonment. So it is compassion. It is a visitation. You are visiting their world to see from their perspective, which is not the same as your perspective. It's a really important element.
And it's literally like, honestly, it's a sign of the mind being flexible and the mind having intelligence, because like you being able to see things from different perspectives, like that's part of intelligence, because your perspective shouldn't be the whole center of everything 24/7 throughout the entirety of your life, because honestly, there's just so much that you don't know and so much that you don't see.
It also is a reminder, like, you chose this partner of yours. So clearly something drew you to them. So why wouldn't you then be curious about finding the value in their perspective, right? That's part of, I think, how we kind of keep admiration alive, is saying, okay, well, I actually need to view this problem from their perspective because I admire them. And if I admire them, then however they're viewing it is going to have an element that maybe I don't see as clearly as they do.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting it at 100% because whenever Sarah and I have like big decisions to make, which is often because I find that, people think now that we've been able to develop some harmony in our relationship that everything's perfect and rosy. Actually, no, what life has become now is just a long series of problem solving because we have families, we have work, we have all these things that are happening, but I trust her wisdom so much. So I'm with her not only because, she's my favorite person to be around, but also I really trust her perspective, like what you were saying. And if she sees something in a different way, I don't immediately think she's wrong. I actually want to slow down and be like, oh, am I perceiving it right? Let's talk about it more because this person next to me, she's super smart. So I need to make sure that, we're moving in a good direction.
The research backs you up on that. There's research from John Gottman that it was cis hetero couples. And one of the big predictors of a happy, successful marriage is when the husband, it's called like leaning into the wife's influence. When he says, you know what? I better get her perspective on this because she's got a really good head on her shoulders. Like that quality is so important in that direction, especially husband to wife. So John Gottman would give you a big old
uh,
thumbs up.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that so much. I think that it's so fun because obviously I have so much respect for science and numerics and like, just like the Western way of coming to answers. And I love the fact that like, there are so many similarities. Like I close my eyes and I meditate for hours. Like I've meditated probably around 13,000 hours now. And we come to the same conclusions. Like,
It's
but we
hilarious,
just,
right?
yeah.
I remember it was like maybe 10 years ago that you could not go to a therapy conference without it being mindfulness and mindfulness and addiction, mindfulness and eating disorders, mindfulness and couple therapy. And I remember thinking like there are like Buddhist monks sitting, in the mountains of Tibet being like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, you all are so clever thinking that you've just discovered this really brand new thing you're calling, mindfulness. You've got all your fancy schmancy scientific instruments to prove the thing that we've been doing for actually
Oh
thousands
my
of years.
gosh. Yeah, and I think, that's so funny because it's true though. Like I feel like my friends who've worked with really good therapists, their therapists just help them see more and they help them accept. And those are two big things that you're getting from the practice, from the meditation practice is like I'm learning how to accept the things that I don't like. Like, sometimes I'll be in retreats and it's tough. It's hard to be so open and feel your emotions and feel the old wounds come up and be able to hold them. But in the act of acceptance, they become a lot less scary. They become a lot less heavy. And it's quite empowering.
Will you talk us through the third greenest of green flags, which is growth? We did kindness, we did compassion. Talk to us about growth, why it's important to cultivate in ourselves, why it's important to seek that quality in our partner.
I think it's really important to work with the universe and not against it. And as I've been meditating, it's become incredibly clear that this whole universe that we live in is one of change. It's one of motion. It feels like everything is just flowing forward like a gigantic river. That means at the atomic level, the biological level, the cosmological level, everything is changing all the time. So, what that means is I'm also a part of this. I'm a changing human being. And when you are intentionally open to your growth, what you're doing is basically taking your evolution into your own hands and saying, yes, like I'm an imperfect person, but I should also have an idea of what I'm good at and what I'm not good at and understand in what ways can I develop. And I find that it's been really helpful to know that Sarah and I, when we first got together, like we were so young and we had our skill sets, our emotional skill sets were quite limited. So as we've been, getting older, it's been the embracing of growth that has brought more harmony into our relationship because we see where we struggle and then we put energy into that area. And like I knew right off the bat that I'm not a good listener. So I need to work at that. And through repetition, through being intentional about repointing my attention back to her words, I've learned over time.
Yeah, the growth is knowing that because you are part of the universe and the flow of the universe that is changing, that means you have to, and you're not wrong for needing to change and grow. That means you are actually in sync, right? To be continuing to evolve is to be in sync with.
Totally. And if you look at it like trying to stay the same, it's way harder than changing because change is bound to happen. And if you fight that, it's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt so bad. It was making me think also, you were saying in the beginning about you and Sarah walking on those tracks, it's like this is in this season of your marriage, this is the medicine. I think that's part of it too, is like I've been married for 26 plus years to my husband. And I could say that I know him totally. I could say that I'm bored and I'm stuck, but I've never known him on this day, like I don't know this. I get to meet him again today and find out what's really front and center for him. And I haven't been in this year. We've never been 51-year-olds together. Okay, what is this about for us? So in that way, there's something also there about in the longevity of a relationship, like you get to kind of keep renewing who are we? Even though inside of me is like 18-year-old Todd, I knew him when we were 18. So he's still there, but I don't know this one, this version of him. I get to
Oh, that's
spend time.
so inspiring. I'm like, we Sarah and I have just been having these conversations where like we've been kind of recognizing how just like really realizing that a lot of time has passed by and we haven't really been, fully we've been like so in the moment that we haven't been paying attention to the fact that like it's been over a decade that we've been together. We spent so much time. We've been married. This summer it's going to be 10 years of marriage together. Before that, we were together for 6.5, 7 years. And it's a lot of time. And then it hit us and it was like, oh wow, like we're definitely getting older. And what came to mind was the fact that I've spent my whole life looking at her face. Like literally my view of the world and my memories are of her standing in front of me and then the world around her. Like I literally know her face better than my face. Like I literally see her face more than mine. And I think it's exciting that we're like getting little wrinkles, that we're like, we're not like the same, we don't have the same like 18, 19-year-old bodies. And that kind of gives me a lot of excitement for the future. And it's like, oh, we're going to be like old little people together at some point. Like that
Shrivelly
sounds
little people.
awesome. Yeah.
Uh-huh. That's really true because there are times when Todd will make a remark about his own lines on his face. And I have beyond zero judgment for his changing face. Like I have nothing but love for it. And so that's I've had that thought of like, if I have zero judgment about his aging face, why the hell do I have judgment about my own aging face? Like, can I give that grace that I so easily extend to him? Can I give that grace to myself? Because yeah, what a miracle. Like what a miracle to be able he keeps looking at my face over all of these many years. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah.
And even what you said too about like getting to know him today, like that's the magic, like the magic of approaching your partner with this constant curiosity. When Sarah and I, when we go away to long retreats, sometimes we'll meditate for 30, 45 days and it'll be totally silent. We'll be, in separate rooms. We literally won't see each other for a long time. But at the end of the retreat, you spend so much time meditating that a lot of the old conditioning in the mind basically gets deleted. It's the mind comes out a lot lighter than before. And when we interact again at the very end of the course, when you start speaking again and then you go back out into the world, I know that we're talking to each other and it's a whole new person. Like it's a brand new person because simple little things like the TV shows that we want to watch, it's not the same. Like we have to figure out what we like again. Even like what if I'm interested in tea or not interested in tea or like as individuals, like and as a couple, it's like we're totally getting to know each other again because so much has changed in our minds for a better, lighter direction. And to me, those are some of the most beautiful moments where it's like I get to know who my girl is again. And it's nice.
That's amazing. I've never heard anything like that before. That's fascinating. Okay, asking a question that I'm imagining people who are listening to us right now want to know. Are you literally silent for the entire
Yeah, literally.
for 30 days?
So for the 30 or the 45-day course, you're silent from the very beginning of it until the last 2 days of the course. The last 2 days, you start speaking again, and you're just like, you're meditating less, you're speaking again, and you're just learning how to be normal again. It's pretty cool because like we come out of it and we check in with each other and we're like, "Hey, are you doing okay? Doing okay? Good." And then it's just the getting to know yourself and getting to know each other process because you'd be surprised even down to like I'll listen to the playlist that I would listen to before the course started and I would hear that music again and it would feel too intense. It's like I can't listen to this. And it would take months before I could listen to that type of music again or I would just have to sort of recalibrate what I like and what I don't like. And that's a natural process in relationships, anyways. Like your preferences are going to change over time, but it's sort of like sped up in those retreat moments.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I want to hear a little more about your origin story with Sarah, but I would love for you to tie it to this idea of intuition because intuition comes up a number of times throughout the book. And there's a point later in the book where you write about, part of how you knew that you wanted to build a relationship with Sarah was through intuition. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what does intuition mean to you? What does it feel like? And then what was the role of intuition in your relationship with Sarah?
I think intuition does arrive a little differently for people, but for me, it's been quite consistent in my own body where it feels very stomach oriented. It feels like I have this sort of calm, almost like waves that will point me in a particular direction. And so intuition doesn't feel like the chattering of the mind. It doesn't feel like the cravings of, oh, I want to have ice cream later tonight or anything like that. It doesn't feel like fear. And it just feels like it's pointing me somewhere. And usually it points me toward a challenge, towards something that isn't easy. I have these key moments where my intuition led me to picking the college that I went to, where I met Sarah, where I met a bunch of my, key friends, my friend Sam, who put me on this meditation path. My intuition also told me to start writing. It told me to move to New York City. And it told me to, that there's no escape that I have to be with Sarah. Like, even if my craving wants me to like, date other people because I was a 21-year-old and, thinking like that's what people do in our culture, but I could feel the magnetism of how correct it felt to be together. And it was challenging because not only were we from very different backgrounds, but we felt like we were together in a way where the love was real, but we didn't know how to care for each other. So there were plenty of reasons for us to break up because we just like we didn't know how to hold the arguments. We didn't know how to stop blaming each other. Like we didn't even know how to take accountability for how our minds felt. And that made the first sort of 6 years of our relationship really challenging, but we knew like, we just kept coming back to each other and we kept trying, kept trying. And then eventually when we started meditating and the self-awareness started developing for each of us as individuals, it was like, oh, actually, this tension in my mind, it's unrelated to you. But my mind is trying to figure out how to
Mhm.
place this blame on
Blame you.
you. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's interesting. Your intuition has at key moments in your life led you to something that feels difficult. So it's an intuition that's oriented towards growth that you're going to have through challenge and struggle. Is there a spiritual element for you? Does your intuition feel like it's tied to ancestry or consciousness or something that is more spiritual, godlike?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never had that question before. I think it's more so tied to my greatest aspirations. I think it's tied to like what actually is going to unfold for the best version of this life. I think a lot of my intuition has led me to this particular meditation path where honestly, I have no recollection of past lives or anything like that. I don't even know if I really believe in that. But the connection that Sarah and I have is so strong, and the connection that we have to this particular meditation style feels so strong that if past lives were real, I would not be surprised. right? Like I would be like, "Oh, that makes sense. Like we've been doing this for many lifetimes together. We love, growing in wisdom together." But it feels like I think in some ways once we got together, we didn't understand why we were together, but then when we started meditating, we were like, "Oh, we love this. We love this separately as individuals, but it's better for us to meditate as a couple and keep going because we can give each other a bunch of support."
Is it the case that the deeper you moved into your meditation practice, the easier it was for you to access and trust your intuition?
I think so. I think so. I think it's become a lot clearer where like, what direction to move in. And I think it's a mixture. Like I like thinking of guidance, because a lot of us we look for guidance outside of us. And I think a lot of people can give us good advice, but ultimately you're the one that has to like activate that advice and make it real. And I find nowadays that when I close my eyes and I'm wondering like what I should do, it really is a mixture of my intuition, my values, and like my nervous system. Like if someone's asking me to do something and I already feel heightened and stressed, and I'm like, I can't take on another thing, that makes it really clear. Okay, that's a no. So there's a mixture of guidance in there.
Yeah, I feel like that question, I'm sure you get this question a lot too. Like, what is the difference between intuition and anxiety? Like, how do I know which voice it is? And when you started, I often give an answer similar to where you started when you're talking about for you, intuition feels like it's really rooted in something that is stomach, gut level. And then it feels, yeah, like a pull or a whisper versus the anxiety, which is the chatter. And so then the fact that you separated those two helped you know then when you feel your nervous system being activated, when there's something coming in, a request or a invitation, then you know, oh, okay, that's probably going to be a no.
Do you feel intuition also lasts over extended periods of time? Like sometimes, like it took me a long time to listen to moving to New York City. Like I was avoiding it for like 9 months, and it just like kept coming up until I like gathered the courage to to move over to New York.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, right. So it was just a kind of a quiet insistence. It wouldn't
Yeah,
go
just
away.
quiet, just like quiet pushing. And I was like, dude, you're done. You got to go
Um,
somewhere else.
that's cool. That's cool. I've got a really great listener question to talk with you about, but I want to first talk to you. Throughout the book, you offer a number of strategies for how we can love better. And one of the ones that you share is that you suggest that we ask our people or our person directly, how can I love you better? What is it you love about that question? And how do you and Sarah use that question in your relationship? How can I love you better?
It's so simple, right? It's almost like devastatingly simple, but it's literally taking the straightest path to harmony in a relationship because we have to stop pretending that we can read each other's minds. We also have to stop pretending that what worked last year is going to work this year. It's not necessarily going to work because the conditions, the situation could have been so different. And I think Sarah and I had this really interesting moment recently where about 2 years ago, we were traveling a lot for work, and the travel was becoming exhausting. And she let me know that it would be best for her and her health if she traveled less. And I was like, great, totally support you. So then I started changing the way that I would speak about it. I started saying, "Oh, I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to go to that place." Sometimes she would join me, sometimes she wouldn't. But then there was another night where about like I think like 4 nights ago, she wanted to make sure that she wasn't being left out, that she was also included, and it was interesting. So I was like, I changed that language because I didn't want you to feel pressured to come. And then she was like, but now what she would prefer is different. And she was like, oh, actually, I want to get the option and be included if I want to come. So like even that slight change in language where it's like, would you be interested in coming to this place as opposed to just presuming that she won't? And that was something that could have been prevented if we had just like checked in about it. But honestly, it was kind of nice because it shows like what worked last year isn't going to work this year. So you might as well ask.
What I love so much about that example also is that what you didn't say is You got to be kidding. I changed it this way to make you happy, and now you need it this way to make you happy. It was just like, you were just like, huh, that's interesting. Because there was a way that I was doing it for a while that worked. And now I'm finding out that that doesn't work anymore. And let me pivot. So there's that lack of reactivity for you. You weren't so invested in doing it right, or, having her give you feedback, and you were just like, okay, well, now we're going to reconfigure how I make invitations. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was fun having that moment because it was like we both felt the tension, and it was coming from a place of like me trying to be supportive in the past. And I was like, oh, I changed the way I spoke because I wanted to fix it. So I did mention it, but I was like, but I'm happy to change it again. It's not like it's not a big deal for me.
I think what I love, and you're right, it is a devastatingly simple question. But what I love so much is that when you ask it, your partner then like has to and gets to ask for what they need, which can be challenging. It breaks the mind reading, certainly, but it also kind of forces us to be in that place of receiving, which is, I think, can be difficult for lots of us for all kinds of different reasons. But there's a vulnerability in asking, because if I ask and you don't give, then I'm going to maybe feel disappointed. And if I ask, you might judge. And so there is something really risky about, you're inviting your partner to open up a bit and to be brave and be bold and to ask for what they want and need. There's a lot of healing in that.
Oh, that's really true. I love that a ton. It took a long time for us to learn, in our partnership that both of us have to be good at giving and receiving. And I had a weird problem with receiving early on in our relationship because I grew up in such scarcity, right? Like there was no receiving. There was like, my mom worked, cleaning houses, and my dad worked in a supermarket. So we were living in poverty for such a long time. And I think that created a situation where receiving was rare. And then when people would try to give to me, I was just super awkward about it. Like super like didn't know how to even handle. And I'm fortunate that, Sarah had so much patience with me to be able to help me work out the kinks of like how to even handle a birthday, or how to even handle like, celebrating victories and stuff like that, because I was just such a bad receiver.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, and maybe something that you wouldn't have even known that you were not good at until you were faced with bounty, and then you had to figure out, okay, how do I let in some bounty?
Totally.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, let's talk about this listener question. You ready for it?
Sure, yeah.
It comes to us. We don't have her name, but she uses she, her pronouns, and she's right here in Chicago with me. And she says, I have been with my boyfriend for about a year and a half, and we have a loving and happy relationship. While no relationship is perfect, ours does not have any points of conflict, and we are generally aligned where values and visions for the future are concerned. For a while, I was sure he was, quote, the one, but I recently started having doubts that I think stem from overthinking or anxiety. I love him. He's a great partner. I want to move forward and get back the mindset that I had before these doubts came in. But I'm worried they will always be there and I will never have that certainty again, which makes me worry that he's not right for me. Is it possible for us to succeed despite my doubts? What would you suggest I work on?
That's really
Here
interesting.
you go. I'll give you the first crack at this. Where do you go?
Yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say about that too. I mean, I have more questions. I'm curious about how long they've been together.
Year and a half.
A year and a half. Okay. So, and it makes me wonder too if the doubts that are coming up are because they're heading towards more serious territory. So it's like, is it just, fear of commitment that's coming up that's like, whoa, we may get engaged, we may get married, we may, start a family, who knows what happens. So I think that's one thing that I would, want to have a conversation with this person about. The other element of that is, I think, a fair warning that this isn't always like this, but I think with the society that we live in these days, like everything is geared towards making things as easy and as pleasant for you as possible. So we live in a society where it's like Uber, DoorDash, we are spoiled for choice. So when you're spoiled for choice like that, we often look for anything that's 1% to 2% better, and even in our relationships where I have one friend who he's a very handsome person and he spent a lot of time dating a bunch of different people. And part of that was because he was just spoiled for choice. And he had a number of different amazing people that he could have had a relationship with that would have been wonderful. But it's hard to just fully settle down when you know that you can be slightly incrementally happier with someone else. And I think that actually ruins the potential for a lot of long-term relationships. And I'm grateful for the imperfections that Sarah and I have. Like, we like to joke that we're a pair of sevens. And we
That's really cute.
yeah. And like I'm more than happy with that, like I think, yeah, you can always look for better, but you can't like find great. You have to build great.
Mm, that's beautiful. Yep, 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 yep. Okay, I upvote all of that. I agree. I think there is something, I had imagined that there is something developmental about this. Like when a boyfriend starts to look like a husband, that's a kind of reckoning, because that means that now she's a girlfriend who's starting to experience what does it mean? Would I am I going to be a wife? Am I going to be a mother? So there's a developmental reckoning that I suspect is as much about her, her own life's journey, and maybe just her associations to marriage, her associations to parenthood, if those are even on the horizon for she and her partner, that there's something that is so kind of sobering and existential about that. And I wouldn't want her to confuse that existential reckoning with doubt about this partner, she's at an edge she hasn't been at before, I suspect it sounds like. And that edge is like that creates all kinds of internal stuff. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with her choice in him. It just means that with that, like crossing that threshold, there's a lot that comes up. And then also grief, if she does deepen into commitment with him, she's grieving the loss of her single girlness, her singlehoodness, that maybe she doesn't ever have another first kiss again, that there's every choice we make, even the ones that we're so excited about and relatively sure of and that feel aligned in lots of ways, there's grief because we're saying goodbye to something.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think I hope this person finds their way. And it's so funny whenever I see questions like that. Sometimes I get questions like that in DMs, and people expect answers, but I just have more questions. I'm like, but I don't know anything about you, and I'm curious
Right.
about what your partner has to say. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I get questions like that, and then at the end it's like, should I break up with my boyfriend? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I don't even know who you are or who your boyfriend is. So, but
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So all we can do is offer some points of inquiry. And I think you've given, you also gave that cultural one, which is like, listen, we are being socialized right now and conditioned that there ought not be friction, that we ought to have smooth experiences. There's entire majors now at college about, user experiences, like making technology as seamless as possible. So we're getting conditioned at a collective level that friction equals bad when this entire conversation, I think, the theme we've been touching on is how much growth there is in the friction. So I wouldn't want, right. Her partner could be a raging narcissist and she really ought to run for the hills. We don't know the first thing, but she's
yeah,
saying,
we don't know.
listen, she's saying there's some things that are really good here. There's a lot of alignment. There's a lot of mutuality. There's a lot of shared values. So there's a lot that she's really drawn to, and she's sitting with this doubt and
Hmm.
trying to make sense of it. And your point, you're highlighting, listen, the doubt may be the fact that there's some friction, and we've been taught to believe that friction equals bad equals try to find something where there's less friction. And if she's doing it right with any partner, there's going to be friction.
Yeah, no, really beautifully said.
Yeah, and what do you think about her meditating on the doubt? Like just being curious about the doubt, like just listening to it, and because we don't know what the doubt is saying, but I was imagining
Hmm.
just her being in conversation with the doubt. What are you saying to me? What do you want me to know?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the key times where opening up to friends, to family members and just having these conversations about like to just get some other perspective because sometimes you might not even notice like we had a conversation with a friend who she got back into a relationship with someone who they had broken up before. They got back together, and while they were together, she was just pissed off the whole time. Like she was so upset the whole time, and she was talking to my wife and I about the relationship, and we had to just tell her, we're like, hey, you notice that since you've been back together, you've just been upset the whole time. Like you have not had a moment of peace. And it hit her like a ton of bricks because she couldn't even see that.
Uh,
And I feel like on the same note, another person could give you perspective, especially if it's a long-term friend, like, hey, I've never seen you this happy. Like I've never
uh-huh.
seen, so much harmony in a relationship. And I think those perspectives can be really helpful from someone who, you trust.
That's really lovely. Yeah. Yeah. I would worry about a friend who says, if you have doubt, that means it's not your person because true love means never having a question. Somebody who's like really swallowed those
Oh, I
romanticized
know.
myths.
That's
But
really
but
true.
what you're saying is actually someone who knows you, listener in Chicago, like somebody who knows you and can say, listen, when I'm near you, when I watch you with this person, here's what I see, here's what I notice, who really feels like they're coming from a place of attachment to you, knowledge of you, history with you, love for you. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, you don't want to ask like a blind loyalty friend where, you make a mistake and they support you in the mistake and they'll go down with the sinking ship. You want someone who's really going to, keep it 100 with you.
That's right. That's right. Not a yes woman. Not a yes woman.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, listener in Chicago, I hope there's lots of good stuff for you to work with in our responses. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Diego, young Pueblo, please talk to us for a moment. I mean, I suspect that lots and lots of people who are hearing our conversation know exactly where to find you, and they have already known you and loved you for a while. But if somebody is new to your work, tell us a bit about how to connect with you and how to learn more from you.
Thank you so much. You can definitely find all my stuff through my Instagram account, Young Pueblo, YUNG_PUEBLO. And through there, you can find access to all of my books, to Wisdom Ventures, the VC company that I'm a part of, and just anything else that I'm working on. You can find all my books in bookstores. How to Love Better will be out on March 11th, and you can get it online. You can get it in a bookstore. And I'm excited for, hopefully this book really serves people well.
It will. I know that it will. All right. We've got links to all of that in the show notes. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful, Diego. It's a really beautiful, your newest book,
Thank you, Alexandra. I'm so grateful that you
a
like it.
great offering. Yeah, really valuable. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you too. Oh, this is so joyful.
Thank you, Diego, for joining me for such a compassionate and healing conversation. In case it didn't hit you over the head already, I want to remind you of this quote from our conversation. Diego said, "You can't find great, you have to build great." I hope that sentiment gives you hope as you continue to build goodness in your relationships and within yourself. We are works in progress, and the tools are in our own hands. If you're eager to check out Diego's new book, which I cannot recommend highly enough, you're going to find that linked in the show notes, as well as all the ways that you can stay connected to him. Until next time, be well. Thank you for listening to our show. Our producers are Elizabeth Vogt and Mary Chan and Katie Paggage of Organized Sound Productions. Our theme music was composed by Slade Warnkin. The show is executive produced by me, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com. where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.